off phones on vibrate or sleep mode. I'm not what? Plenty of Roscoe, Stand Fish Street. Blessing of the new moon. Barakatha Yahweh Basham Yahweh Shai Asherai Natamanawa Hakadash Bashalawam the water Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the new moon in peace. Thank you, Sophia. The Ali Masha the Ali Ma'a Asherayim Achad, Psalm 121. Anya Rayam Ayamimya Oh Harim Mayan Yabua Azoria Yabua Mayahu Shashab Shamayam Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Ragalia Yala Yanawam Shashwa Marke Hanad La Yanawam Wala Yashan Shashwa Mar Yashvele Yahweh Shamaria Yahweh Tazalia Ayo Yim Yawamam Hashemash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamaria Makab Rai Yashamar Napashe Yahweh Yashamar Hawalakya Wabuaya My Fa Wa Aid I Wulan Basham Yahweh for what Aman.
Book of Psalms 121. I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore.
Amen. Shema Yasharallah, hear O Israel. Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharallah, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad.
This is the book of Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou,
This is
Amen.
Amen. Tapalai how the Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6 and 9. Abinawe Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shamka Yahweh Malakwaf Kab Taba'ar Ritazawanka Hayya Aisha Baratiza Kaba Shemayim Lukalanawe Lakham Yawam Zad Wasalak Lanawe Kabawat Nawe Kasalak nawe, kabawat nawe, wala ay abiyar nawe, al nasayawan, abo awashay nawe, muray kaya laka hamalakwat, wa ala wa thapara, wa walam aman.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
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 Amen. Aisha Ramatazawaf, the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20. La'ab, Yahayab, Lakab, Alahayam, Akaryam, Alpanyab, La'ab, Daishab, Lakab, Paso, Wala'ab, Thaibadam, La'ab, Talakwaka, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashua, Zakar, Af, Hayawam, Hashabath, Lakodashwa, Kabad, Abiyaka, Wa Amaka, La'ab, Taratazak, La'ab, Tana'ab, La'ab, Baganab, La'ab, Thainab, Shakur, La'ab, Thakamad, Ko, Asherah, Lara'ika, Amen.
Exodus chapter 20. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto them, unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land, which the Lord thy God giveth. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen.
Amen. Shewbread. You see that? Outstanding. Outstanding.
Thank you. The water.
Oh, can you wait till we finish?
Oh, sorry.
Barakati Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai, Asherat Hanal Parya Gapan Twaraman. La Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai, Av Yashar. Priesthood. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Ahmad Panuali Roshlams, Peace Jerusalem. Barakata Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Abiyah, Wanawa'eh, Aliyawan, Malak, Shal, Shamayim, Warataza, Wakal, Dabarim, Kayayam, Wagam, Amashiach, Mayahawe, Arawanawe, Ahabnawe, Apalai, Yawaitiza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawe, Yahweh, Baratazawan, Ainka, Yash'ala, Zarnawe, Banai, Wazap, Yash'ala, Au, Nanawe, Yam Yan, Aitha, Kayawumyam, Makwadam, Babakushai, Shalak, Mike Ale, what has wadak? Alahayam, La, Maganawe, Rapharnawe, Washamab, Ilnawe, Bakur, Shalak, Haroka, Shao, Yao Shai, Lanawe, Lamadnawe, Rabiam, Kakamai, Thabawane, Wada Aif, Shao the Barka Basham Yahawashai the Wadi Thum Yed Waiwalam Aman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, and wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you. Right now, like the days of old, please send Mike on the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the Spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Nathan Lanawa, Hatharawat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Asherat, Natham Lanawab, Award, Lara Awak. Blessed are you, Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Asherat, Natham Lanawab, Quran, Hayel, La Korad, Ha'ain, Yeshabra. Please be seated.
Oh, the water.
Get a little bit more on here.
See what?
Take a couple more on here before it cooks out.
What's that?
Some more stones. It's not too hazy, right?
Feels good, brother. Feel nice and high.
High on the truth, I'm hoping.
You got the margarita?
Okay, so Shalom Yasharella. So Shalom everybody that's here with us in Philly. Shalom everybody that's watching us on live stream, and shalom everyone that's listening in on teleconference, whether it be now or later. Welcome to Aishala Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples found mainly in North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean, make up the southern and northern, how did I say that? Make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel. So, so-called descendants of slaves, as well as so-called indigenous peoples, and that we fall into a lower state, whether we're talking politics, economics, or religion, because we broke the laws of God found in the Bible, given to us by Moses. And it become out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to the commandments we broke, by following Jesus the Christ, who did no sin, neither was God found in his mouth. We've been having some holy days back to back, as far as the Sabbath, as well as the first fruits. At least our particular branch of Christ has celebrated first fruits the Sabbath that just passed at sundown. And now we're celebrating the new moon coming into the 5th month of the year. And just as our Lord and Savior would do, and as he instructed him as well as his fellow disciples to do, we're trying to keep those holy days the best we can, as we see information or we see records of us keeping the new moon and keeping it holy. So that's what we're doing right now, and we happen to be in the 5th new moon of the year. So we're going to be going into just a couple verses. I am the bar. Going to a couple verses for the new moon, just as a review. I think most of us that are watching or listening and probably know what the new moon is already about, but we'll just go to a couple verses to make sure. And then, as you see, probably in the title, I mentioned the 7 senses in the tabernacle. So after we go into the new moon scriptures as a review, what we'll go into is the 7 senses. Most of us probably learned about the 5 senses when we were young, right? As far as smell, taste, hearing, right? But then when you read the Bible, it mentions the 5 senses, right? That we know as far as the physical senses, but then we have 2 more that go along with that as well, right? That deal with not only understanding, but also what I'm doing right now, which is communication of speech. So we'll get to go into the scriptures that talk about that. And then we'll kind of do like a visual walkthrough of the tabernacle and cite different verses for each of the senses as far as when you read about the tabernacle, the congregation, how it's supposed to be laid out. As Moses was instructed, you'll see how it engages all of our senses, right? Those 7 senses that we're talking about, different aspects of the tabernacle, the congregation, that Aaron, Moses' brother, was appointed to be over. So we'll touch on each of the senses and then touch on some of the scriptures you can write down for each of those as it pertains to the tabernacle. And hopefully it'll be an interesting journey. So like we talk about our mind's eye, we're going to use our mind's eye, our mind's ears, our mind's nose. We'll use pretty much our senses in our mind to pretty much be engaged in the tabernacle as if we were there, as if we were beholding it ourselves, walking around, seeing the different layout of the things that are in there. And I put those in the description of the video ahead of time. So if you pull up the description of your video as you watch, you'll see the notes that I have in there for each of the senses. And then we'll have the scriptures for each of those senses as it pertains to the tabernacle and how aspects of the tabernacle engage our senses. So that was kind of the idea I had to kind of go into it this time for the new moon. Let me change the ticker here. So put it up here in the Hebrew. So this says Ashar Chadash, and it says Hama Yashia. That's how you say 5th. And then finally we have Yasha Allah, or Israel. Okay. So this will just be a review. Numbers 10 and 10. That we should be familiar with. So Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10. Let's get that one first. Is that a 1611 you got there?
Yes, brother.
Looking sharp.
Thank you. I got it from y'all.
Okay. Looking good. Looking brand new. Mine's
Yeah,
pretty.
I never use it.
Mine's pretty tattered. So mine's pretty tattered.
Yeah, you use it. I don't use mine.
Mm-hmm. So could you read Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10?
Oh, sure, bro.
You good with the Roman numerals too?
I can add them up.
So as brother gets that, I'll just say all praise to the Most High in Christ, but with the Holy Spirit, for lives to come together yet again, a third day, not only on the Sabbath and for the first fruits, but also for the new moon. My name is Nabi Al-Zabrabal. If you don't know already, I have the pleasure of going through the service with you, as well as the privilege. And for your notes, you can just write down that today is the 16th of July, 2023, according to the Gregorian calendar, but according to our calendar, it would be the 5th month and the 1st day. Since we're in the new moon, we will start counting today as the 1st day of the month, even though technically we're in the 2nd day of the week. So whenever you're ready, brother.
All right. It's the book of Numbers, chapter 10 and verse 10. Also, in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginning of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God.
There you go. That's what the Most High told Moses to tell the people to come together at these times, the beginnings of our month, which is what we're coming together for right now, and to sound off with the trumpets, which earlier on in this chapter, they're read, it says that they're silver, even though a ram's horn is also a trumpet as well. And we would do that over our different offerings that we did. Now, we don't do that now because we go through Christ at this point, but we'll reinstitute this in the kingdom when he makes his second coming, as far as keeping the peace offerings and other offerings you find in the first couple chapters of Leviticus. But the emphasis here is on when we do it. The beginnings of our months. So to show that's the new moon, let's get an example of our forefathers keeping it, kind of like what we did during the first fruit. You read examples of our forefathers keeping Pentecost, whether it was during the time of Christ, or during the time of the apostles, or even during the time of the Assyrian captivity with Tobit and Tobias. We'll get some history of when we kept the new moon during the time of King Saul, as usual. 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 5. You could read that, Baba Bashar. 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 5.
Right. And David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the fields unto the third day at evening.
Right, so during this time they're keeping the new moon as well. But David's telling Jonathan, who's Saul's son, that he should always be there because he's part of their household at this point, being King Saul's armor bearer. But he doesn't want to go because he notices an evil spirit troubling Saul, and how Saul seeks after David's life without a cause. Right? So they make a plan as far as how to figure out if the coast is clear, if that evil spirit is going to continue to trouble him, or if he's actually going to be peaceful with David. So they figure out a way to communicate with each other outside of his dad's knowledge to kind of figure out whether or not the coast is clear and if he's going to actually be at peace with them. So that's what him and Jonathan are working out. But now the new moon comes in and they follow their plan. So jump to verse 24.
Verse 24. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat. And the king sat upon his seat as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty.
Right. So they came together as they normally do, and this being a special occasion, the new moon. So the usual folks were there. Jonathan was there. Abner, who was Saul's captain of the host, was there. But David was missing. Now we know Jonathan knows what's going on, but Saul doesn't. So what does Saul think to himself? The fact that David's not there.
25. And the king sat upon his seat.
I think that's 26, yeah.
26. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought something had befallen him. He is not clean, surely he is not clean.
Right. So he thought that there might have been some cause as far as whether it was warfare or he was with a woman or what have you, or had a mission. Different ways that you could become unclean that are out there, coming across a carcass, coming in contact with the carcass of an animal even. But he figures that's why he's not there, since he's usually pretty diligent to come together for the holy days. So check out verse 27. This verse is good because it shows us that the new moon is the beginning of the month. Because before in Numbers, it just says beginning of the month. So people might argue, oh, well, beginning of the month is, July 1st, August 1st. Not realizing the way we told time, as far as the beginning of the month, we use the moon to determine that, right? According to our lunar solar calendar. And that's not what you have being pushed today.
All right. 27. And it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meet, neither yesterday nor today?
Right. So just like you emphasized, it says the second day of the month, which was the morrow, which means the new moon had to have been the first day of the month. This is now the second day. So now it's 2 days that he hasn't come, because he would sit down to eat with them regularly, even if it wasn't a feast. But now he's wondering, okay, it's 2 days in a row, and where's he at? Because he doesn't know. And you read down and you see what happens there. But let's now go to the new moon in Psalms, because I know a lot of times when people talk about Psalms that are not in the truth, that believe in so-called Christianity, read the Psalms and Proverbs. They like books like that, but then they miss how, though even those books will talk about who we are as a people and what we need to do to reverse the curse as far as keeping these laws. So Psalms 81 is a psalm we like to read to show where the Most High instructs us to keep the new moon holy. So let's go to Psalms 81, and let's read verses 3 and 4.
These are Psalms 81, 3 and 4.
Come.
All right, this is the book of Psalms, chapter 81, verses 3 and 4. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon and the time appointed on our solemn feast day.
Right. So this is blow up the trumpet on the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast days. That's what we did earlier, right? Before we started the service. Right? So we just have a psalm here where we're commanded to do so. Read verse 4.
For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the God of Jacob.
There you go. So this was a statute for Israel and a law of the God or power of Jacob, right? Jacob being our forefather. So this is a customary for us to do this, right? Which customs is what? Something that you say or something that you do at a certain time, right? And the new moon is one of those things that we would do, among other things. So let's even go into the future where in the kingdom, we're going to be operating within the temple according to the instructions the Most High gave us, similar to how we did with the tabernacle before we built the temple. The temple was destroyed ultimately in the time of 70 AD, but when we rebuild it, we'll establish it like it was before. And when everyone else is resting in the nation, you read about the temple being open for business because the sons of Aaron were pretty much operating on the Most High's behalf to make sure the temple was being taken care of and furnished, and that they were accepting offerings and doing different deliberations and helping the people out with whatever matters they may have had. So let's go to Ezekiel to show that. Ezekiel 46. And let's start from verse 1 to show that. Which at the end of Ezekiel, the last couple chapters, it goes into visions that he's having of the kingdom and how it's going to be established in the future. So you read that Baba Shah, Ezekiel 46, and we'll start from 1. So you're doing pretty good with the Roman numerals. That's good.
Yeah, it's something I learned a long time ago. I just forgot it.
Yeah, they're not exactly like the ones I learned, the way to do all the numbers. Sometimes it might have like more than one X. If you go through the Psalms, you'll see the most of the Roman numerals being used there.
Yeah, because they go all the way up to 100.
Right, exactly. That's a good book to use to kind of practice. See how high up they go as far as, okay, V is 5, X is 10, L is 50, C is 100, so on and so forth.
So we just say 46, right?
In verse 1.
Verse 1. Okay. Thus saith the Lord God, the gate of the inner court that looketh towards the east shall be shut the 6 working days. But on the Sabbath it shall be open, and in the day of the new moon it shall be open.
Right. It's like we were talking about before. When the rest of Israel's doing their pleasure, handling their business during the week, that's when the temples is closed, this inner court, I should say, the gate. But it says on the Sabbath and on the new moon, that's when it'll be open, right? Because that's where it's open so that Israel can come and bring different offerings, or if they have certain questions or need certain things done, they can come on that time to where the sons of Aaron will make sure that the temple's operational, right? Read on to verse 2.
And the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate without, and shall stand by the post of the gate, and the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offering, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go forth, but the gate shall not be shut until the evening.
Right. So we see the prince being mentioned here, which is like a chief or chieftain, which would be like a representative of one of the tribes of Israel. They will come to bring certain offerings on behalf of themselves and behalf of their tribe. You see this going on also when we read in the couple chapters of Numbers, where you see it. We practiced this during the time when we were in the wilderness. So you'll see what we did in the wilderness with the tabernacle. We would carry forth a lot of those traditions, but just on a grander scale to the temple, which was pretty much set up the same way that the tabernacle was set up before, which we'll get to read about a couple of those things shortly. Read on in verse 3.
Likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord and the Sabbaths and in the new moons.
Right. So it says, the people of the land, which is talking about us, shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord. When will we do it? The Sabbaths and the new moons that we're keeping right now. Right. And as far as Numbers is concerned, as far as the priests that would bring their different offerings, you can just write down Numbers, the 7th chapter. You have to get it, but Numbers, the 7th chapter, where we'll see examples of princes bringing their offerings and then being representatives of their respective tribes, bringing offerings to the sons of Aaron to the tabernacle, like how we see here being done. So just something to read on your own time, Numbers chapter 7. The whole book is good, but as far as what we're talking about, put that down. Okay. So I want to go into what we're talking about here as far as the senses that we use, because when we talk about growing up, not just physically, but growing up spiritually, as far as maturation, being mature, this is what it tells us, right? So go to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 5. We'll start from verse 12. And I'll read this. So Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12. Let's make sure you write it down. So we're going to a couple verses. Let's make sure you take them and just, as we listen to them as we go through them and follow along, but just make sure you write them down so you can review them later also. So Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12. Just say "con" if you have it. At least written down. So Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12. It reads, "For when for the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teacheth you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat." So the author of Hebrews here is writing to our people who were, as it would say, Hebrew of the Hebrews, who knew that they were Hebrews, right? And in this book of Hebrews, you'll see how they'll use things that are found in the law to show us the importance of following and believing on Christ, right? How all these things are pretty much symbolically representative of Christ in different ways. But it's pretty much going into here how you could say admonishing the people to say, I wanted to teach you more things, but I see you need to kind of go back to basics to make sure that you relearn and work out the fundamentals. Like it says here, the first principles of the oracles of God. It says, now become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. So just like a child can't go right into strong meat right away, they can only deal with milk first, right? That's how many of us were, where we weren't ready to deal with that strong meat yet. We still had things we had to learn. In verse 13, it says, everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe, right? So we use that expression, the sincere milk of the word, and you see the milk metaphor be used often. We always emphasize that as being the thing to know first and foremost, is like a foundational level when it comes to knowledge, wisdom, understanding, right? Topics that are hot topics that always come up. We always express the importance of, folks, especially that are newer, even folks that have been in the truth for a while, they're kind of going through holy days more than once. We always emphasize that the milk of the word, right? The first principles of the oracles of God are the key things you want to be able to explain and talk about, right? Because these are the topics that come up the most. Examples will be, the color of Christ or the color of the Most High. Why does it even matter? Topics like how to show nationality. Topics like, is the law done away with? Right? Topics like, who did Christ come for? Topics like, what is love? Like, what is sin? Right? What is baptism? What does it mean to be born again? What does it mean to speak in tongues? These are different examples of the milk that we should be aware of at the very minimum, since these are the things that we want to be able to explain to our people that are out, that are not in the know, just like someone explained to us when we didn't know. It says in 14, but strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age. See, so we want to be of full age, but spiritually, because the Bible tells us that wisdom is the gray hairs unto man, and it says an unspotted life is old age. So even we might be youthful in appearance, right, or not, we want to make sure when it comes to our spiritual body that we're mature, right? We have a full head of gray, because sometimes they might not go hand in hand. Sometimes you might have examples of people who might be very youthful in appearance, but they're of full age when it comes to the spirit, and sometimes you have the reverse where you're a person who may be physically very old, but as far as their spirit, they're very young and immature, right? You have that. And we know there's scriptures that go into that, as far as it's not just so much about how much time you've had in the earth, but it's pretty much how much wisdom you've acquired with whatever time you've been allotted to learn it, and how much you're able to apply it. But this last verse is what I want to get into when it comes to exercising our senses, and this being a key thing we want to be mindful of when it comes to growth, maturity, operating within our environment, whether it be dealing with spiritual matters, even matters when it comes to the world, being able to hone our senses, right? That's going to be a key aspect as men and women of Israel, prophets and prophetesses, to be sharp. We want to make sure that we utilize all our senses. That's why it says here, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil, right? So let's talk about these senses, right? We'll talk about the ones we probably learned about already. Like I said, growing up as a youth, we learned about, our bodies and things like that. We learned about the senses and, how they work and how we can use them to interact with the world around us, right? To be more familiar with it. So let's go to Ecclesiasticus chapter 17. Once again, Ecclesiasticus chapter 17. Let's go there. And let's start from verse 1. We just got done reading Hebrews 5, verses 12 to 14, if whoever just joined us. Now we're going to Ecclesiasticus 17 and verse 1. So Ecclesiasticus 17 and 1, it reads, "The Lord created man of the earth and turned them into it again." Now we just read this, we were reading through Esdras, right, during the Sabbath service the other day, right, as far as Adam being made from the dust. So that's what we're seeing here. But they're also going into specifics when it comes to just the condition when it comes to how we came to be in the earth and how we interact with whatever days, how we interact pretty much with the rest of the creation, with the time that we have in the earth. It says in verse 2, "He gave them few days and a short time, and power also over the things therein." Right? And we went to that too. What gives us the short time? Because we transgressed in the garden, which that's what began our lives to be short, because we weren't supposed to die initially. Once we disobeyed, that's when our lifespans got shorter and shorter and shorter. Where we saw we were living centuries, now down to like 120 years, now down to 70 years. And we're around that 70-year period now. But now we're beginning to wake up these last couple decades to learn, okay, here are the ways to live and truly live, not just physically but spiritually. This is what it means to truly fully be alive, so that our days can be prolonged. When it says power over the things therein, remember he gave man dominion over the fish of the sea, over the cattle and creeping thing of the earth, and over the fowls of the air, right? Then it says in verse 3, he, referring to the Most High, endued them with strength by themselves and made them according to his image, right? So we're modeled after the image of the Most High. We read in Genesis as well, where the Elohim together said on that sixth day, let's make man after our image, after our likeness, right? And that goes from physically how we're shaped, but also deals spiritually how we're designed when it comes to the wisdom and how we're fashioned to resemble the Most High, Christ, and the other powers, which makes us different from the other creation that doesn't. So made them according to his image. Now it says in verse 48, and put the fear of man upon all flesh, and gave him dominion over beasts and fowls, right? Like we saw with Adam. Even like we see now, where you might just be walking around somewhere. You could be in the city, you could be in the countryside, you could be in the park. You might come across different animals, and then you'll see how they will respond to you, right? We had a better connection with them when we had a better connection with the Most High. But now, when we sin, especially when the other nations sin, we can see the Most High can have these same animals we had dominion over, get the advantage over us, and then those animals could be used as a tool to punish us, as well as other things in nature. Anytime as mankind we act out and act up and go against the scriptures. And we see how the Most High will use those animals against the other nations. In some cases us, but definitely against the other nations, when they go off and go totally left outside the scriptures. But now, check this out. It says in verse 5, they receive the use of the 5 operations of the Lord. So when we talk about, our reasoning, like we talked about the Judges Code a couple new moons ago, we talk about our emotions, right? Or at least the key emotions and our facial expressions that we have that usually speak to what those emotions are. We talked about that a couple moons ago. These are all things that are of the Lord. These are aspects that the Lord has that He imparted unto us. And the Most High gave us the scriptures as a guideline to when we feel these things or think these things or sense these things we're talking about now as far as these operations, right? Using our senses. These are the same senses that the Heavenly Father has. And these are the senses that when it comes to His law and what things He wants us to set up, as we're going to see examples of that, He interacts with us or has us interact with our environment, with our senses. But these are senses that He Himself has, that we talked about before, as far as sight, as far as smell, taste, etc., right? So that's also an aspect of us being made in His image. So it says they receive the use of the five operations of the Lord, right? Which those, I used to work from the top of my head, to remember, right? So I'll say, okay, I had touch, I have eye, I have seeing, hearing, smelling, and tasting, right? So those are the five that we usually learn. But then it says, in the sixth place, He imparted them understanding. So we actually have a sixth sense. So the sixth sense is understanding, or like we read in Hebrews 5:12-14, discernment, being able to discern between good and evil, which is pretty much just our reasoning, our decision making. So that's where our sixth sense comes in. That's a sense we're going to talk about as well. But then it says, and in the seventh, speech. So that's what I'm doing right now with you, right? Communication in a particular language. It says, speech, an interpreter of the cogitations thereof, right? And we talked about that during first fruits last night, right? When we went into Acts chapter 2, where one of the spiritual gifts that the Most High put on our people was to be able to speak in other tongues or other languages, right? Even if we hadn't learned them growing up, they weren't our first languages. We could speak and understand new languages we never heard before, but through the Spirit, it was like we heard it, even though it might have been the first time hearing it, we still understood it like it was our first tongue. It's that dealing with the seventh sense. So let's go into these, and then let's take a trip visually as we read it. Let's try to imagine what was shown to Moses as he gave this instruction to the different craftsfolks of Israel that were set up to make the attributes of the tabernacle. And like I said, when you go into the description for the video that you're watching right now, you'll see I put the notes there. So let's start with the first one. So that was Ecclesiastes 17, we read 1-5, right? About us having seven senses. So what I want to do is just touch on those senses specifically, and then just give you some scriptures that you can read pertaining to the tabernacle that was shown to Moses on the mount, and different aspects of the tabernacle that would engage that respective sense. So first, let me pull up my, so I have it here on my phone too. So first, let's talk about sense of taste, right? So when we think of our sense of taste, we can think about back when we were in the wilderness. We can go to Exodus. Well, first, before we go to Exodus 16, just write down for taste. Write down manna, right? And then write down Exodus chapter 16. So when we were in the wilderness and traveling around, we partook of manna because we weren't in a land to grow things and rear up, livestock and cattle for our nourishment, right? There'll be a process or a time before that would happen. So the Most High delivering us out of the hand of the Egyptians, having us go into the wilderness, He would have the manna be on the grass in the morning, and we can go out and gather it up, and it'll be enough for everybody to partake in for each day, right? It talked about an omer's amount, but this manna, as we're going to read in these scriptures, it had a certain taste to it, right? I think we talked about this a little bit too during the time we had the Passover service a couple months back. But along with the manna, we could also write down as far as another attribute of the tabernacle of the congregation. You can say or write down the table of shewbread. So we have the manna and we have the table of shewbread. I'll just copy and paste it to make it easier. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So now this is Exodus 16 and 31. You can write that down. So Exodus chapter 16, 31, it reads, and the house of Israel called the name thereof manna. It says, and it was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Right? So right there, just going into what the taste of it was like, and how this manna was something that we partook in all the time we were in the wilderness, right? As far as taste goes. And then another aspect that goes another verse that goes into, I guess you could say, the miraculous quality of the manna. You can write down Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 16. So, Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 16. We were talking about that too, how different foods may have different names depending on what language you speak. Or it could be the same language, but then just have different things for it, like coriander, also being referred to as cilantro, right? Some folks might see that same herb and whatnot and say, oh, that's cilantro. I grew up learning and calling that cilantro. Whereas others may say, oh, well, we always called it coriander. But it's talking about the same herb or the same food or the same fruit, the same vegetable. But it might have different names depending on, what language you speak or what region you're from. But it says it had that kind of taste. But now, Wisdom of Solomon chapter 16 in verse 20, where it reads, instead whereof thou feddest thine own people with angels' food, here it just calls it angels' food, right? But it's still referring to the manna. It says, and didst send them from heaven bread prepared without their labor. It says, able to content every man's delight and agreeing to every taste, right? So going to the miraculous attribute of the manna, as far as it had like a base taste, which we just read in Exodus 16. It also could adjust depending on whatever desire the person had, right? So, what kind of thing that you can think about, even that we, we're in the modern era, right? In 2023, can do this, right? And, you can't think of anything that can actually do this. They try to isolate taste from food and add what they call natural flavor, and even coloring to certain food and make it taste a certain way. Say it again.
I think in the Willy Wonka chocolate factory, I think they had something.
There you
go. Similar to that.
Right. So scientists try to isolate these things, right? But can they get to this level, right? Where we just read, it contents to every man's delight and agreeing to every taste. But now, in verse 21, it says, for thy sustenance declared thy sweetness unto thy children, and serving to the appetite of the eater, tempered itself to every man's liking. Yeah. So, like I said, as advanced as we've gotten, we just say Esau because he's in power, but oftentimes he'll employ us and other dark nations to invent things as well. And sometimes we'll get the credit, but a lot of times they'll take the credit and use it to their end. We've seen it with other empires too. When they conquer the people, they'll take their best and brightest and hire them in their governments and their companies, and use all their ingenuity and industriousness to further their enterprise, and to say, good job, thanks, run along, and sign this paper. It says, anything you come up with when you work for me is intellectual property. It belongs to me anyway, even if it was your idea. But now, also for the table of the Shewbread, Exodus 25, because remember that I'm sure this tasted pretty good as well, as we're going to read, which was for the priests. Exodus 25. '23, and I'll read down to 30. So when we go through these scriptures, especially what we're going to read mainly in Exodus, when you see kind of like blueprints being laid out, try to envision it with your mind's eye, or envision all your senses, envision it as if you were there and Moses giving instruction and people are actually building it. And once it's built, how it interacts with your senses, to where it can become more alive in your mind. It's like we were saying earlier, when you learn to read and learn to comprehend what you read, we come to find, even when we're young and as we get a little older, the authors we tend to enjoy the most often write in a way that engages the senses, right? Where you read it, it kind of comes alive. And scriptures are no different, to where we read about even things like this, it can kind of come alive in your mind, where you can imagine, oh, what that would smell like, or in this case, what this would taste like, right? Because we know when it comes to food, it's a little bit of both as far as smelling and tasting, but we'll get to smelling in a little bit. But let's read this about the table of showbread. So Exodus 25 and 23. Thou shalt also make a table of shittim wood. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit and a breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. Let me make sure I read that right again. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. Right? So we have the dimensions of it, which we can also imagine too. Remember, with a cubit, like we mentioned, the omer, when we talk about omer's amount of manna is like a half gallon. A cubit is like a foot and a half. So think of a foot, and then like you just tack on 6 inches. So it's pretty much 18 inches. So when you read about these dimensions and try to imagine it in your mind's eye, think of something that would be that size, right? When you look at those cubits, you might be more familiar with inches. So you can just change it to inches on the fly. It's a pretty easy number to do. You just think of like a foot and a half when it comes to a cubit. But reading on to verse 24, it says, and thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, and make thereto a crown of gold round about. It says, and thou shalt make unto it a border of an handbreadth round about, and thou shalt make a golden crown to the border thereof round about. So it have like a golden crown on the edge of it, right? It says, and thou shalt make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings in the 4 corners that are on the 4 feet thereof. So you have rings on the corners of it, because that's how they would carry it. It says, over against the borders shall the rings be for places of the staves to bear the table. So a stave is just plural for a staff. So we had staffs, kind of like the ones we have when we keep the Passover and we hold them in our hands. We would slide those through the holes in the side of this table and lift it up like that, right? The Levites that were responsible for it. Then it says, over against the border shall be the rings for the places of the staves to bear the table, and thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, that the table may be borne with them. And thou shalt make the dishes thereof, and the spoons thereof, the cover and covers thereof, and bowls thereof, to cover withal. Of pure gold shalt thou make them. So there was different wares that were accessory to this table of showbread. And finally, it says in verse 30, and thou shalt set upon the table showbread before me always. And there's other verses that go into detail as far as how often the showbread was made, but that's the main we want to get as far as the aspect of the tabernacle that deals with taste. So now let's go to the next sense. And once again, feel free to just rewind the video later if you want to go back to these, but also just go into the description of the video. Everything I'm talking about now, I have the details there. So now let's get to the next sense, which is the seventh sense, speech, right? Since we're talking about speech, an interpreter of the connotations thereof. So what aspect of the tabernacle deals with speech or communication? Let's find out. So when it comes to speech, what we have is, and it's funny because it's actually right there in the name, and even in the name, it's called this for a reason, which we're going to see when we read it. But you can just write down for speech, the Ark of the Testimony, and the mercy seat, pretty much the lid that goes on top of the Ark of the Testimony. So once again, the Ark of the Testimony and the mercy seat. You can write that down for a speech. And then the scriptures that we'll go to for this one. Exodus 25. So stay in Exodus 25. Let's go up to verse 10. So once again, Exodus 25, let's start from 10, and we'll read down to 16. So Exodus 25 and 10, it says, and they shall make an ark of shittim wood. So same wood they use for the table of showbread. As we're going to see, it's going to be some slightly different dimensions here as far as the length, the width, and the height. They shall make an ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, a cubit and a half the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. Right? So more a rectangular shape that was like a longer shape as opposed to the table of showbread, which was kind of more long ways. This one is more longer this way. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold within and without. Thou shalt overlay it, and shalt make upon it a crown of gold round about, so similar to that table of showbread. It says, and thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it also, and put them on the 4 corners thereof, and 2 rings shall be in the one side of it, and 2 rings in the other side of it. And thou shalt make staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, and thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark, that the ark may be borne with them. The staves shall be in the rings of the ark, and they shall not be taken from it. And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. Right? And as we go on, it talks about the mercy seat where it says, and thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and a cubit and a half the breadth thereof. Right? So the same length and breadth of the Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark of the Testimony. But this is talking about the lid that will go on top of it. That's why it's the same length and width. Thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them, in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. So we had the alahine that we'll make on this lid, which you see certain depictions of it from movies and certain history books. They try to do an artist rendition of what they think these cherubims would have looked like. And make 1 cherub on the one end and the other cherub on the other end. even of the mercy seat shall ye make the cherubims on the two ends thereof, and the cherubim shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall be the face of the cherubims be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. So this lid has these two Elohim with the wings kind of pointing this way towards each other, right? This goes on top of the ark, which has the testimony inside. So now here we go in verse 22, since we're talking about speech, right? And interpreter of the connotations thereof. So when it comes to the sense of speech, in verse 22 it says, and there I will meet with thee, and will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. So the Most High is going to speak to us, namely to the high priest at a certain time when you read other verses, from the top of this mercy seat. So that's why we associate the speech, or we can associate speech with this particular attribute of the layout of the tabernacle. One more for this, and then we'll go to the next sense. But Numbers chapter 7, and I mentioned that chapter as a whole earlier, but I'm gonna get a verse out of that now. So let's go to Numbers chapter 7 and verse 89. Should be the last verse. So Numbers chapter 7 and verse 89, it reads, and when Moses was gone into the tabernacle of the congregation to speak with him, then he heard the voice of one speaking unto him from off the mercy seat that was upon the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubims, and he spake unto him. See that? So he did it with Moses initially, but then it will be set up later on for this to happen between him and Aaron and Aaron's descendants, where he would always have priests that would come after him. And then within every generation, you would have a high priest among the sons of Aaron. And he would commune with them from that mercy seat at different times. So now for the next sense we want to get is for touch, the sense of touch, right? Or feeling, right? So for touch, I have, let me just copy and paste this, and we'll see why touch is important when it comes to these next features of the tabernacle of the congregation. So the rod of Aaron, you write that down, the rod of Aaron. And then also you can write down the altar of burnt offering, and we'll get scriptures for these as well. The altar burnt offering, and why touch is significant when it comes to the altar burnt offering, and why that sense is tied to this. And then we also have the holy anointing oil, which we'll read about that and who that pertained to, who would put that on, and who was allowed to put that on. So let's go to Exodus chapter 7 and verse 12 for this one. Exodus chapter 7 and verse 12. Which reads, once again, Exodus chapter 7 in verse 12, it reads, and I guess I could start at verse 10, and I'll read down to 13 to get the whole thing, to get the whole section. But it says, Exodus chapter 7 and verse 10 is going into Moses and Aaron after him being away for what? 40 years, because he grew up in Egypt for his first 40 years and then went into the wilderness and dwelt with Jethro his next 40 years, right? But now he came back to Egypt to then tell the Pharaoh at that time, let the people go, that they may serve the Most High and keep a feast unto him. Right? And we had the whole deliberation back and forth with him and Pharaoh, right? Where he would allow him to go and then he would change his mind as the Most High would harden his heart. But emphasis here on Aaron's rod. When we go to Exodus 7 and 12, it says, and Moses and Aaron went unto Pharaoh, and they did so as Yahweh had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers. Now the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantments. So we know with the Egyptians, they had power on the left hand side too, right? To do things that we might consider or call supernatural, right? And you have these practices still done today, oftentimes in secret, right? With certain groups or certain organizations being privy to this. But the Most High said, in regards to what time that we lived in, to never partake in this as His people, right? If anything, we have our own miracles we can do through Him and through His Son. But then it says they did that in verse 12, and they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. It says, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods, right? Just showing that Aaron was dealing with the Most High, in that his rod would be able to overcome theirs. And that's the edge that we always have, the advantage we always have when it comes to those in the world who want to practice the left-hand path. It says in 13, and he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said, to let the people go. But now jump down to verse 20. And in verse 20 it says, and Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded. It says, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river, in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. Right? So just by him taking the rod and touching, right, the river with the rod, it turned the river into blood. Right? So this sense of touch actually doing something rather miraculous, something very unusual. Right? What else did it do? Jump to Exodus 8 and 17 as well. As you read on about these different plagues that we smote the Egyptians with, in many cases, Aaron's rod. The Most High could have done it anyway, but he just had the rod of Aaron kind of be a conduit, if you will, to carry forth his will. Because, the carnal man would look at this and say, oh, we have to find this rod and figure out how to tap into its power, not realizing it's ultimately the Most High that gave this rod power, but not to take the object and to turn it into an idol, right? That's not the point of this. But that's what a lot of people would do or try to do if they were able to get their hand on something like this. But it says in 8 and 17, it says, and they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. So them taking the rod and now hitting or touching the dust and having lice come out of it. Now that's miraculous. But it's interesting because you go back to Genesis, right? This is a power from the Most High, right? To where we know he took the land and the water and then brought things out of it, right? You read about him bringing birds and all the different animals that come in the waters, making them out of the water, right? They're taking the H2O, as we call it in chemistry, and changing it to make birds and to make, fish and whale and things like that. And for the cattle and the creeping things, right? We know in Genesis those came out the dust. So he's just taking that dust and kind of doing that again where he's making the lights come out of it as a means to judge the Egyptians for not letting us go and for their wickedness. Jump to Exodus 27. Today I want to talk about the altar burnt offering, because we're going to read about this as we go into First Kings, about how the altar burnt offering, what it can do if you touch the altar of the burnt offering, right? This is the one that was rededicated during the time of the Maccabees, right? That was destroyed and defiled by the Greeks, right? But we associate this one with touch as well, and we'll see why as we get the details about that. But now this is Exodus 27, and I'll start from 1. It reads, "And thou shalt make an altar of shittim wood." So we got shittim wood again, just like we have for the table of the showbread, as well as the Ark of the Testimony. But the altar burnt offering was too. This one's going to be a little bit bigger than those. It says 5 cubits long and 5 cubits broad. The altar shall be 4 square, and the height thereof shall be 3 cubits. Right? So you have an idea of how big that would be, right? If you were standing next to it. "And thou shalt make the horns of it upon the 4 corners thereof. His horn shall be of the same, and thou shalt overlay it with brass." So this one's going to be overlaid with brass as opposed to gold, like we saw with the table of the showbread in the Ark of the Testimony. "And thou shalt make his pans to receive his ashes, and his shovels, and his basins, and his flesh hooks, and his fire pans. All the vessels thereof shall thou make of brass." So all the different equipment and wares that go with the altar burnt offering will be made of brass, right? Remember, this is going to be, it's more or less it's a holy grill. We talk about the altar burnt offering, right? It's a righteous grill that we carry with us, that we use to not just cook for ourselves, but to prepare offerings for the Most High, right? So cooking of the highest order. "And thou shalt make for it a grate of network of brass. Upon the net shalt thou make 4 brazen rings in the 4 corners thereof. And thou shalt put it under the compass of the altar beneath, that the net may be even to the midst of the altar." So that's like the grate that you would lay the different meats down on, right? Kind of like a grate that you would have in a grill, right? It says, "And thou shalt put it under the compass." I read that. "And thou shalt make staves for the altar, staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with brass. The stave shall be put into the rings, and the stave shall be upon the 2 sides of the altar to bear it. Hollow with boards shalt thou make it. As it was shown thee in the mount, so shalt they make it." So Moses was shown a vision of how this was to be made in the mount. So that picture that he had in his mind, he then laid the blueprint out. And you read other places, it talks about the certain crafts folks that they had set up to build these things, right? I think one of them was a Judite, the other one was a Danite, Bezalel, and I think Holiab of the tribe of Dan. But they were the craftsmen that would take the raw materials that the other Israelites would provide, and they would be the ones to be the chief builders to go about building these different devices with the raw material provided. So stay in Exodus, but let's go to 30, chapter 30. Let's go to verse 22. So Exodus chapter 30 and verse 22. So now we're talking about the holy anointing oil. So Exodus chapter 30 and verse 22, it reads, "Moreover, the Lord, or Yahweh, spake unto Moses, saying, Take thou also unto thee principal spices of pure myrrh, 500 shekels, and of sweet cinnamon, half so much, even 250 shekels of sweet calamus, 250 shekels," it says, "and of cassia, 500 shekels, after the shekel of the sanctuary, and of oil, olive, and hin," right, which goes into like a certain volume amount, right? Sorry, 1 second. Just want to make sure of something real quick. Yeah, there we go. Oops. Okay. $29. Okay. Yeah, I got that. All right. So it says, where did I leave off? 25, I'll read that again. And thou shalt make it an oil of holy ointment, an ointment compound after the art of the apothecary. Or you'll see sometimes in the middle caption, the perfumer, right? To make perfumes, which we'll get into that also. And it shall be an holy anointing oil. It says in 26, and thou shalt anoint the tabernacle of the congregation therewith, and the ark of the testimonies. Uses oil to rub to kind of give these devices that they built. They're overlaid with gold and with brass to give them a certain luster, right? So that they would shine. Imagine when the sun would hit it, probably, the oil would make it shine to where you probably look away, right? Especially on a sunny day. It says, and thou shalt anoint the tabernacle of the congregation therewith, and the ark of the testimony, and the table and all its vessels, and the candlestick and its vessels, which we'll talk about that later too, and the altar of incense, which we'll get to also when we get to smell as well as sight, and the altar of burnt offering with all his vessels, right? Since we're talking about touch right now, and the laver and his foot, which they used to put water in to wash in before they did the holy work, the priests. And thou shalt sanctify them. It says that they may be most holy. It says, whatsoever toucheth them shall be holy. See that? So if you touch these, it says you'll be holy just by coming in contact with them like that. It says, thou shalt anoint Aaron and his sons and consecrate them that they may minister unto me in the priest's office. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, this shall be an holy anointing oil unto me throughout your generations. Upon man's flesh it shall not be poured, neither shall you make any other like it after the composition of it. It is holy, and it shall be holy unto you. Whosoever compoundeth any like it, or whosoever putteth any of it upon a stranger, shall even be cut off from his people. So it wasn't for any other tribe or even other families of Levites. It was specifically for Aaron and his sons to put this on, right? So they would put it on as well as on these holy vessels. It wasn't for anybody else to make this anointing oil, right? So now you might see these herbs above, right? The cassia, the myrrh. You might say, okay, well, I burn this in my house instead of third. You know, just by burning those things, because you like how they smell, using those things, maybe if you cook, you use those things for that. That would make it wicked. But if you're taking these things and trying to put these things together, like we see here, trying to make a recipe like the whole anointing oil to use it for yourself, right? That's right. Now you get in trouble. Remember, there's what we do, but there's also why we do it. If your intent is to do that, to try to, you know, intentionally smell like how Aaron smells and his sons and how the vessels are with this oil, right? You try to make that. That's now where you get into trouble. But we'll see that with the perfume they will put on as well, and how they would use that along with this oil. Uh, One more. This goes with the tabernacle. Um, Chapter 29, Exodus 29. You can write down verse 37. That to go with the altar burnt offering that we're talking about, the sense of touch. And once again, when we get to First Kings, which I think we only have two more chapters of Second Samuel, if we didn't finish it already. Once we do get to First Kings, we'll see the altar burnt offering and touching it, what that means. That'll come into play. And we kind of remember back to this. But it says in Exodus 29:37, 7 days thou shalt make an atonement for the altar, talking about the altar of a burnt offering, we read above. And it shall be an altar most holy. It says, whatsoever toucheth the altar shall be holy. So remember that. It's going to come back later in the Sabbath service. Let's get one more and then move on to the next sense. So Sirach or Ecclesiastic is 45 and 15. Ecclesiasticus 45 in verse 15 to go with these scriptures too. There we go. So Ecclesiastes or Sirach 45 and 15, it reads, Moses consecrated him and anointed him with holy oil. Right? Read above this section is just dealing with Aaron. You start back up to, at verse 6. It says, Moses consecrated him and anointed him with holy oil. This was appointed unto him by an everlasting covenant and to his seed so long as the heavens should remain, that they should minister unto him and execute the office of the priesthood and bless the people in his name. Right? So the authors of Ecclesiastic is making mention of the importance of the holy oil, right? And how that pertained unto them. All right, so now let's get to the next sense, which is smell or smelling. And for smell, we have the altar of incense and the perfume. And we see what the perfume is. We'll see what that is, because it's similar to the holy anointing oil when it talks about how it's exclusive. It's supposed to be meant mainly for the tabernacle and for the sons of Aaron and what they do that's most holy, pertaining to the priesthood. So for the altar of incense, that's Exodus 30, 1 to 9. So Exodus chapter 30, in verse 1, it reads, And thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon, of shittim wood shalt thou make it. Right? So that same wood, this wood is pretty much used for all the vessels, as we can see. A cubit in the length shall be the length thereof, a cubit in a cubit the breadth thereof. 4 squares shall it be. So kind of like the altar burnt offering, where the base is like a square as opposed to a rectangle. And 2 cubits shall be the height thereof. So now we're seeing how tall the thing is, right? So it's more like an elongated, like a box, if you will. It's not like a long thing sideways like the Ark of the Covenant, but more of a tall box. It says, the horns thereof shall be the same. So this one has horns on the side too. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, the top thereof and the sides thereof round about, and the horns thereof. And thou shalt make unto it a crown of gold round about, and the 2 golden rings shalt thou make to it under the crown of it, by the 2 corners thereof. Upon the 2 sides of it shalt thou make it, and they shall be for places for the staves to bear it withal. So you see this trend of carrying these things with staves, and using the rings to do it. And I shall make the stays of shittim wood and overlay them with gold. So it's going to have gold as well, or could be covered with gold as well. And I shall put it before the veil that is by the ark of the testimony, before the mercy seat that is over the testimony, where I will meet with thee. Right, which we already went into that one. And Aaron shall burn thereon sweet incense every morning. When he dresseth the lamps, he shall burn incense upon it. Right? So we see who's supposed to burn the incense and when he's supposed to burn it. And when Aaron lighted the lamps at even, right, which we'll get to that when we get to the sense of sight, because the candlestick we know is going to provide the light. And when Aaron light the lamps at even, he shall burn incense upon it, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall offer no strange incense thereon, nor burnt sacrifice, nor meat offering, neither shall ye pour drink offering thereon. And Aaron shall make an atonement upon the horns of it once in a year, with the blood of the sin offering of atonements. Once in a year shall he make atonement upon it throughout your generations. It is most holy unto the Lord. Right? So we see that there as well, and how often he's to do that. As far as the perfume goes, we jump down to verse 34. It talks about that there. So in Exodus chapter 30 and verse 34, it reads, And the Lord said unto Moses, Take unto thee sweet spices, stacte, and onycha, and galbanum, these sweet spices from pure frankincense, of each shall there be a like weight, and thou shalt make it a perfume, a confection after the art of the apothecary. Right? Just like we saw with the anointing oil, right? Tempered together, pure and holy. And thou shalt beat some of it very small, and put of it before the testimony in the tabernacle of the congregation, where I will meet with thee. It shall be unto you most holy. Right? So just imagine how good the oil, the holy anointing oil smells, and especially this perfume we're reading about here. Then it says, As for the perfume which thou shalt make, ye shall not make to yourselves according to the composition thereof. It shall be holy, it shall be unto thee holy for the Lord, or Yahweh. Whosoever shall make like unto that to smell thereto shall even be cut off from his people. So once again, the perfume is exclusive. And then back in Ecclesiasticus 45, but now we read verse 16. They make mention of this here as well. So now we're talking about the sense of smell here. So Ecclesiasticus 45, but now we're getting verse 16, which reads, He chose him out of all men living to offer sacrifices unto the Lord, which we read above in verse 6 is talking about Aaron. Incense and a sweet savor for memorial to make reconciliation for his people. Right? So dealing with the altar of incense, all pertaining to the sense of smell. So we're getting all the senses pretty much engaged by the the setup of the tabernacle of the congregation. And Aaron and his sons obviously being mindful of it as they had to operate with these things and use them. So now we're going to sound, which is hearing, right? So hear, or hearing. And for this one, we just have the robe of the ephod. And there's a certain attribute of the robe of the ephod that we'll touch on. So for the robe of the ephod, which is pretty much what the priest would put on, you can write down Exodus 28, 31, and we'll read down to 35. Exodus 28, 31 to 35. It reads, "Thou shalt make a robe of the ephod all of blue." So we see the color. "There shall be an hole in the top of it, in the midst thereof it shall have a binding of woven work round about the whole of it, as it were the whole of a habergeon, that it be not rent." So a hole at the top, and you have like a thing tied to the edge, right, to keep the collar from ripping, right? It says, oops, yeah. "And beneath upon the hem of it thou shalt make pomegranates of blue and of purple and of scarlet," right? The three colors we see associated with the tabernacle of the congregation, right? "Round about the hem thereof, and bells of gold between them round about." Check that out. So you got bells of gold at the hem of the garment. And what's going to happen with these bells? 34, "And a golden bell and a pomegranate, and a golden bell and a pomegranate upon the hem of the robe round about." So you see the off and on a bell and a pomegranate, right? So not the actual fruit, but just like something made to look like a pomegranate. It says in 35, "And it shall be upon Aaron to minister or to serve, and his sound," says the hearing, "shall be heard when he goeth in unto the holy place before Yahweh, and when he cometh out, that he die not." Right? So anytime he will walk, it will have like a chime, right? He'll walk back and forth. His robe would chime. And then once again in Ecclesiasticus, they give mention or detail to this as well. I'll get it real quick. Ecclesiasticus 45. In verse 9, where it says, "And he compassed him with pomegranates and with many golden bells round about, that as he went there might be a sound and a noise made that might be heard in the temple for memorial to the children of his people." Right? So there we have the bells to pertain to the sound. All right, so we got two more to go. Then we got understanding. So understanding, which we know was the sixth sense that was mentioned in Ecclesiastes 17. That's spelled right? Yeah. So for understanding, we've got the thing we can think on when it comes to the sons of Aaron and the tabernacle. We can think of the different accessories that they would put on, along with the robe of the ephod that had the bells. We can also think about the breastplate of judgment, and we'll see why. So the breastplate of judgment, also something that was put into the breastplate of judgment, which was the Urim and the Thummim, which were like these crystals that were embedded into the breastplate of judgment, which you translate those words, Urim and Thummim, they just mean lights and perfection, right? So these were used for understanding, to know what Israel should say, what Israel should do when certain situations arose. And then we'll also get the plate of gold and the mitre, right, which was the headpiece that they would wear as well. So we've got a couple verses here. Exodus 28 again. 15 all the way down to 29 gives us all the detail, but I'm just going to read verse 30 here for this part. But you can just have for your notes 15 to 29 to get all the detail for the breastplate of judgment. So Exodus 28. In verse 30, it says, "And thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and the Thummim, and they shall be upon Aaron's heart when he goeth in before Yahweh, and Aaron shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before Yahweh continually." So this breastplate represented the judgment, right? The decision making, the understanding, right? The discerning between good and evil that he had to constantly wear as a reminder when it came to decision making for him and his house, and also for all the people. So we can see this sense of understanding uh, definitely be tied to this as far as the breastplate of judgment and the crystals that were inside of it, the Urim and the Thummim. And then as far as the plate of gold that was set pretty much right in underneath the mitre where it would come together, because there would be a space up top, but then they would put a plate of gold right there. It says in 36, same chapter of Exodus 28, "And thou shalt make a plate of pure gold, engrave upon it, like the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord." So we'll write that in the Hebrew, holiness to the Lord, on this golden plate that would be right here on his mitre. And it says, "And thou shalt put it on a blue lace, that it may be upon the mitre, upon the forefront of the mitre. It shall be, and it shall be upon Aaron's forehead, that Aaron may bear the iniquity of the holy things, which the children of Israel shall hallow in all their holy gifts. And it shall be always upon his forehead, that they may be accepted before Yahweh." And then in Ecclesiasticus 45 again, I'll read verse 10 and also verse 12. So Ecclesiastes 45 and 10, where we know these couple chapters, these chapters deal with the sons of Aaron, well, Aaron and his sons. Ecclesiasticus 45 and 10, it says, "With the holy garment, with gold, with blue silk, with purple, with the work of the embroiderer, with the breastplate of judgment, and with Urim and Thummim." Then in 12 it says, "And he set a crown of gold upon the mitre, wherein was engraved holiness, an ornament of honor, a costly work, and desires of the eyes, goodly and beautiful." Right? So just imagine, you know, how nice they would have been to look upon. You know, the artist renditions can do Aaron and his sons justice, right? Compared to actually seeing our people, as opposed to the ones the way they have it set up. You know, I know it look a lot better in person compared to what they give us in these different Bible dictionaries and, you know, so-called references. So now we have sight. That's the sense that we have left, or to see. So for seeing now, we've got two. Kind of got, I guess you could say, a bonus one. Now within the tabernacle of the congregation, we have the candlestick, but I also want to mention another one that was pretty significant, as you see our Lord and Savior even being compared to it metaphorically when you read in St. John chapter 3. So for seeing, or for sight, we have the candlestick, right, which we know is 7 candlesticks that burn light so that they could see inside the holy place, right? Then we also have the brass serpent as well, and we'll get a couple verses to show that significance as well. So for the candlestick, we've got Exodus 25, and we'll get 31. Exodus 25 and 31. where it reads, "And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold, of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side." Right? So we have to have questions now for those who call themselves Jews and are not, but do lie, where they have a candlestick that has 4 on each side and that one in the middle. It's supposed to have 3 on each side and one. So 7 total, not 9 like they have. Right? So what are they dealing with? It says 3 bowls made like unto almonds, with a knot and a flower in one branch, and three bowls, sorry, made like almonds in the other branch, with a knot and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick, and in the candlestick shall be made shall be 4 bowls made like unto almonds, with their knops and their flowers. And there shall be a knot under the 2 branches of the same, a knot under the 2 branches of the same, and a knot under the 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick. Their knops and their branches shall be of the same. All of it shall be one beaten work of pure gold. So if we're in our mind's eye going into the holy place, we see that all the different devices that are in there are covered with gold, right? Whether it be the table, the showbread, right, to our right, the candlestick to our left, and then the altar of incense in front of us, which we know when we go past the veil, you've got the Ark of the Testimony behind the veil, which is covered with gold as well. It says, "And I shall make the 7 lamps thereof, and they shall light the lamps thereof, that they may give light over against it." So there's the sight or seeing. "The tongs thereof and the snuff dishes thereof shall be of pure gold." So it has its accessories too that they use to keep maintenance on that as well, right? As far as the keeping the candlestick burning. It says, "Of a town of pure gold shall he make it with all these vessels. And look that thou make them after their pattern, which was showed thee in the mount." So Most High giving Moses all his wisdom and knowledge, along with all these different blueprints, right? Uh, visual images that he's given him, and the different dimensions and materials, to where when he accesses those pictures, he can then just explain it and go, okay, here's what the Most High showed me to do, and it's just there, right? Kind of how we can remember places that we go. So now Numbers chapter 8. Numbers chapter 8, 1 to 4. We'll read that. Numbers chapter 8 and verse 1, it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speaking to Aaron, and said unto him, When thou lightest the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light over against the candlestick. And Aaron did so. He lighted the lamps thereof over against the candlestick, as Yahweh commanded Moses. And this work of the candlestick was of beaten gold. Unto the shaft thereof, unto the flowers thereof was beaten work, according unto the pattern which Yahweh had showed Moses. So he made the candlestick." So there you go. And then now for the brazen serpent, which we know was used on a certain time, we read this story as a whole. It's interesting. That's when I get into what makes the brazen serpent significant when we talk about sight and seeing, as far as that particular sense. So Numbers 21, I'll just read 7 to 9 for what we're talking about here. So Numbers 21 and 7, "Therefore the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against Yahweh and against thee. Pray unto the Yahweh that he take away the serpents from us." And Moses prayed for the people, right? It says, And Yahweh said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. Right? So the people being punished by being bitten by these snakes. We read above in the story that transpired. But now he has this device that he has Moses set up to be like a deliverance, uh, a tool or a conduit for deliverance, even though it's ultimately the Most High doing it. But he says to look upon it, there's the sight we're seeing, you'll live. It says, and Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he had beheld the serpent of brass or saw it, that he lived. Right? So there's that. So that was 7 to 9. And then to close out sight, Sirach 26, which is Ecclesiasticus 26, and we're going to read 27. Hmm. Wait a minute, I must have wrote that down wrong. No. Wait a minute, what's this? One second here. Let me just see. 26 and 27. Okay, I'm not sure why I put this here, but either way, let's go to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 9. So make sure I'll take that off the notes. I'm not sure why I have that in my notes here. But Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 4. So Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 4. Take that here, make sure that's not in his thing. So we have that. Just delete that out of the notes. 7 to 9. And numbers 8, 1 to 4. And good, updated. So Hebrews chapter 9 verse 4 reads, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had the manna. So within the ark of the testimony, if we didn't know, talk about taste, the manna was in there inside the ark of the covenant. So we know the last people to see it were in 2 Maccabees chapter 2, Jeremiah and those with him bearing it in Mount Nebo, right, for it to be unveiled where it's at by a prophet in the latter time, which more than likely will be Yahweh Shai Mashiach when he makes a second coming. He'll probably show us where it's at or where it was placed. It says, wherein was the golden pot that had the manna? It says, and Aaron's rod that budded, right? Because you read in another area, it talks about Aaron's rod budding, which if you want, I'll give that to you. That's in Numbers. 1 second, I'll give it to you. (16, 17). Here we go. So Numbers 17, 6 down to 9. You can link with Hebrews 9 and 4 about the Aaron's rod budding, which I'll read that real quick. So Numbers 17 and 6, it says, And Moses spake unto the children of Israel, and every one of their princes gave him a rod apiece, for each prince one, according to their father's house, even 12 rods. And the rod of Aaron was among their rods. And Moses laid up the rods before Yahweh in the tabernacle of witness. Right? And it came to pass that on the morrow Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi, since they're Levites, was budded and brought forth buds and blossoms and yielded almonds. See, almonds and blossoms coming from it, right? Which clearly is a miracle, because it's not like a tree that's planted in the ground, yet it's sprouting almonds and blossoms. And Moses brought out all the rods from before the Yahweh unto the children of Israel, and they looked and took every man his rod. And the Lord said unto Moses, Bring Aaron's rod again before the testimony to be kept for a token against the rebels, and thou shalt quite take away their murmurings from me, that they die not. And Moses did so as the Lord commanded him, so did he. And the children of Israel spake unto Moses, saying, Behold, we die, we perish, we all perish. Whosoever committeth anything near unto the tabernacle of the Yahweh shall die. Shall we be consumed with dying? So anyone who thought it was a good idea to buddy up with Korah, and I think his name was Dathan? Yeah, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, those the Levite and the Reubenites that wanted to have a coup and say, we don't need to follow Moses anymore. They learned their lesson. And it was clear here after what the Most High did with Aaron's rod that he was dealing with him and dealing with Moses. So that put that rebellion down. But now in Hebrews 9 and 4, it says, I'll read 4 again, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. So the tables written with the finger of God were in the ark of the testimony as well, right? So yeah, when we read in Exodus and read about those different things, we probably don't look at those things a lot, which is understandable, right? It may not be the most exciting thing to go through, but it's definitely something that you can do to kind of exercise your mind in that way, where you can think about how you engage in the world with your senses, and you can kind of take yourself there and say, oh, okay, so this is how the sons of Aaron operated on a daily basis, each week, each month, each season, when holy days came around, and how they had to make sure that the tabernacle was set up appropriately and functioning, and then later on the temple as well. And just for us to remember these things, we can imagine it with our mind senses, whether it be our mind's eyes, our mind's ears, our mind's nose, right? Our mind's tongue, if you will, because we're talking about taste, right? As well. Even the sixth and seventh sense of, understanding or discernment and speech, right? All these things are engaged for us to remember the Lord and remember what he instructed of us and what he had us set up on his behalf. So once again, I put these in the notes if you guys want to read through those and then kind of go through those scriptures again and try to imagine it as you read it, by all means. And then I had the verses that we read towards the end, which were the Hebrews 9:4 and Numbers 17:6-9, to go with that as separate verses. But yeah, I'm not sure about Sirach 26 and 27. When I was going through this, I wrote that down for sight, but I'm not sure why I did. I have to look back at that again. There might be something else in Sirach that may have to do with the candlestick. Let's try 45 and 26. Let me see if I got a chapter 45, if it says that there real quick, and if not, then we'll just erase it from the record altogether. Blot it out. 26. God gave wisdom and judgment. Is that what it was? According to the covenant made with David, the son of Jesse. 26, 27. No. No, I don't think that's it. So you can just delete it. All right, so there we go. So there, it's all covered. So we'll make an end there on the fifth new moon, as well as the I just want to say Brakate Awabah Shemi Awashah La Roka Kodash. Without them, this would be possible. And thank you for joining us again. Once again, I know it's been back to back to back services and holy days, but this is the last one in this sequence at least. So definitely try to enjoy this day too. Keep the new moon holy to the best of your ability. If you have to work tonight or today when the sun comes up, just try to have activities going on to keep you in the mind and in the understanding and the remembrance of the new moon as well as the first fruits that we just celebrated, and just kind of be in that spirit of the first fruits still, even though it's over, but we know that being fruitful is something we want to do all year round. It's just something that we're reminded of, especially during this time. So we definitely want to continue to do that as the weeks of summer go on. So we'll make an end here and we'll say Ashar Kadash, and like we see here in the bottom, Ashar Kadash Kamayashia, which just means happy fifth new moon, Yasha Allah, Israel. Once again, thank you guys for joining us and hanging out. I know late on this Sunday night on the new moon. And with that, we'll do the closing prayers, and we'll talk to everybody in the upcoming week for the Tuesday and Friday classes, which, if we don't remember, I'll just post those real quick, those links that you can go to. So we have the Profitable Talks, which is the web Zoom link every Tuesday and Friday for the class. And then if you want to call in over the phone, we have the teleconference, which is this number right here, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So that's the number, as well as the access code. And then if you want to make donations for the holy day or just for tithing or what have you, we've got the address here in Philadelphia. You can send a check of money order to. And electronically, we have the paypal.me portal, which is paypal.me/HYK12. And we also have the Cash App account, which is as follows, Hakanas. All right. And like and share the video. With all that will be edified by such. And we'll say Sirach Kadash once again. And with that, we'll do the closing prayers. So enjoy the day. Yasher Allah. Let's continue to be fruitful as we're in the season of first fruits. Barakateh Hawa by Shemi Hawashai, Asherat, Tanawa, Paragapan, Tuara Aman. Like Hawa by Shemi Hawashai, Af Yasher Allah. Had a little whoopsie there. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. I Magwa, Panyua, Yerushalayim, stand face Jerusalem. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawe, I thought, Yem, I thought, Shalak, Mike Allah, Walla Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La Shema Ayo, Barak, Rabha, Magan, Wa Chaziyak, Banya, Yash Allah, Wa Shalak. La Nawa Rabium Kakamad Rabium Da'ath Rabium Bayanad Rabium Sabalanwa Rabium Amawan Rabium Aqua Rabium Mahabium Rabium Haganad Rakanaya Wasalak Ko Katayanawa La Akim Wa Akiwak Wayash Aletham Yed Wywalam Basham Yahusha the Water Aman. English translation Yahweh. In the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, Thank you, so be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawe, Wayash Allah, Wabath Yasapariam, Shema, Yasharallah, Yahweh, Elohai Nawe, Yahweh, Akad. English translation, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, blesses Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Now, prayer for the food. Yahweh, Gadawa, Basham, Marawanya, Yahweh Shai, Babakosha, Barak, Makal, Yanawa, Shatayawath, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lacham, Yanawa, Shakara, Yanawa, Zakar, Hayarak, Kadash, Basham, Yehoshua, the water, Aman. Which I know you were interested. So that means great Yahweh. In the name of the Lord, Yahweh Shai, please bless our food, our drink, our wine, our bread, our strong drink in the feast of the new moon. In the name of Christ, thank you, so be it. All right. So, Laila Tuak, Gasharala, Wa Kadash. Enjoy the feast. We'll talk to you in the Tuesday and Friday class. Laila Tuak.
Right on to God.
Laila Tuak, Shalom.
All right.